And if you hear a little corgi in the background, please disregard her. Um, she just likes to bark. She's the sheriff. Sheriff on duty. Okay, welcome back to another episode on Annie Analyzes. Today we're going back to Understanding Ozark. Originally, I was going to do both of the first episodes, so I was originally going to do Sugarwood and Blue Cat in the same video, but I just did so much depth into Sugarwood, I decided I wasn't going to do it both in the same video. So I'm going to do Sugarwood today, and then I'm going to do Blue Cat a different day. I'm still deciding if I want to post more during the week. I just have so much going on. I don't know if I have enough time for that. Anyway, so I'll try and see if I can do Blue Cat next week and then something else during this week. We will see. Please don't hold me to that. But today we are going back into Understanding Ozark, and I'm excited to tell you about episode 1, Sugarwood. And just as a disclaimer, this is not real money. So please do not come rob me. All right, let's jump in. So at the beginning of every Ozark episode, there is a black screen that has some icons on it, and the icons spell out the Zark of Ozark, and it's usually little symbols from the episode. So I'm going to tell you about every single one for every single episode, for every single video. And today I'm going to discuss this one. So the Z signifies Marty on his knees begging for his life. The A is the Hancock Tower in Chicago, and that kind of solidifies the setting of Chicago. And the R is a gun, clearly. And the K is a man falling. And I will discuss who that man is and why he's plunging to the ground. Okay, like I had mentioned in the foundation episode, there is a lot of coloring aspects to the scenes. And while I was rewatching the episode last night, I discovered that the first couple episodes don't have as heavy of a filtering versus like the rest of the series. So that was interesting, and it's interesting to see the transition between how we begin the series to how we end. So I just wanted to point that out. And the title is named after the lover of Wendy Byrde. We will get there. In the opening scene of this episode, we hear Marty Byrde talking about money.
Money is not peace of mind. Money is not happiness. Money is, at its essence, that measure of a man's choices.
A lot of this TV show hinges upon choices. And we see that especially in the first episode because there's a lot of choices that Marty and other characters make that lead them to what happens in the Ozark. So let's talk about it. So, a short synopsis of the entire episode is we meet Marty Byrde, who is a financial officer in Chicago, and he's advising a young couple about their finances. And he receives an email, and in that email includes a very naughty video that he should not be watching at work. As he's watching it, his business partner Bruce walks in, and he kind of closes the deal for Marty and gets the business of this young couple. So then we see Marty and Bruce touring this office building, which they are being led through it by Bruce's fiance, who's named Liz. When Liz leaves the room, Bruce confronts Marty about the video that he was watching, and he was like, "Oh, you little dirty bird." And then he says, "Marty, you have a very boring, subdued life. Like, that was very vanilla." And that's when Bruce takes the Ozark brochure out of his pocket and tells Marty all about it. Marty's again very hesitant about this. He's not the kind of person to take risks, which very interesting for the rest of the series, but he drives this really old Camry. But we see the juxtaposition between Bruce and Marty, and maybe this is how Bruce got caught. So Marty goes home, he's having dinner with his family, and we find out that the woman from the video from the email that he was watching at work is his wife. And she's having an affair, obviously. And he never confronts her about this until a scene in the first episode that kind of spills the beans. And I'll let you in on that. But Marty has hired a private investigator to find out about his wife's doings. And this is how he got this email. They're watching TV together, but he is continuously watching the video from the email on a loop while she's sitting there. And she says, "Hey, I'm going to go to bed, like TTYL." And Marty steps out for an adventure. So Marty goes out, and there's this woman in his car, and she's talking about how wonderful Marty is, if she was his wife, yada, 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 right? It's just like a lot of praise from this woman to Marty. And then it switches to an outside view of the car, and we realize that he was imagining this whole entire conversation with this woman. Then Marty gets a phone call, and it's from Bruce. Bruce is like, "Hey, you need to come down here to the Hansons." And Marty's like, "Oh, no, I don't want to come to Hansons." And then he's like, "You need to come because Dell is here." Bum, bum, bum. The father of the Hanson duo, the Hansons are the owners of a trucking company that are also involved in this laundering scheme. And he says, "We don't have anything to do with it. We didn't take your money," yada, yada, yada. So they're all like pleading for their lives. And Marty comes off, he's like a little like, "What is happening?" And then Dell discusses the story he has of when he was a child.
And then one day, my father's closing up, and he sees Aunt Carlota slip $5 worth of pesos out of the two.
So Dell goes around the room, he says, "What should my father do about Aunt Carlotta?" The father of the Hanson duo is, of course, casting blame. He says, "Oh, I would give her a second chance, should go on probation." And Dell's like, "Probation? What the if, you silly Americans." And then he asks Bruce the same question. Bruce also kind of shrugs off and says she should get a second chance because it's only $5, right? Then it comes to Marty's turn, and Marty kind of deflects the situation. He says, word for word, "This is an intimidation audit." So Marty doesn't really know what's going on. He's kind of late to the conversation, and since he doesn't really answer the question, Liz goes to the bathroom and she is shot through the door. Dell shoots and kills her. So then the son part of the Hanson duo freaks out and he's like, "Oh, it was Bruce's idea. It was Bruce's idea." So now the skimming scam has been announced. So they find themselves at the loading dock of the Hanson warehouse, and the father son Hanson duo are the first to go, unfortunately. Then Dell makes his way to Bruce and asks him how did he do it. Bruce says, "No, we rigged the gas gauges." Interesting. And then Dell asks, "How much did he take?" And Bruce says, "We took 8 million over 3 years." 8 million is crazy. So Dell makes his way to Marty.
This place right here has more shoreline than the whole coast of California. And apparently, every summer, hang on, listen to me. Every summer, the population of this place explodes.
So obviously this plan saves Marty's life. And Dell says, "Well, you have 40 hours to recoup the 8 million that these idiots stole from me." So at this point, Marty's scrambling. He says, "I got to take all this money out from the bank. I have to liquefy all my assets. I have to take all this cash. I have like 7 million something dollars in all these assets." But meanwhile, Wendy is speaking to her lover. His name is Gary Silverberg, but she affectionately calls him Sugarwood. I'm not explaining that one. If you don't get it, you don't get it. So Wendy and Gary are having this conversation because Marty kind of let her in on the scenario of what needs to happen, that they need to leave. They need to move to the Ozarks and launder all this money. So while Wendy and Gary are speaking, he says, "You need to take as much money as you can as fast as possible." So she leaves, she clears out the checking in the savings, and Marty finds this out because he gets a notification from the bank that Wendy had withdrawn all this money. As all of this is happening, Marty is discussing things with the private investigator, getting the lowdown of everything that happened with his wife. And once he gets the notification, he says so, and the private investigator's like, "Do you have a gun?" Marty's like, "No, I don't have a gun." And then he's like, "Okay, well, Silverberg's apartment is this address." Wendy arrives back at Gary's apartment and she's like, "Okay, I'm back. I have all the money." And Dell and his associates are there and they look like they just beat the shit out of Gary. When Marty arrives at Gary's apartment, he's telling himself this whole speech and he's walking through the street, and all of a sudden, Gary falls from the 80th floor, and obviously he dies, and he dies right in front of Marty. When Marty gets back in his car after this traumatizing event, he gets a phone call from Wendy's phone, and he's like, "Hello, Wendy, are you okay?" And it's Dell. And this is when it's revealed that Marty does know about the affair, so now he knows, cat's out of the bag. But Dell discusses again the story of Carlotta.
What did my mother make him do? Fire her. Why? It's not the first time she stole from you. What was it? It's the first time you caught her.
So Marty makes his way to the bank, and the bank is like, "We can't get all this cash out for you." So they walk into the vault, and there's FBI agents there.
And if I want to put all $7,945,400 into a hot tub, get buck naked, and play Scrooge McDuck, that is 100% my business. Now, where's my money?
As you can see from this clip, Marty's incredibly quick-witted, and this plays into his survival instinct of persuasion rather than violence. And it's kind of like amazing to be like, how the heck did he think of that? Like right off the bat. And he obviously gets the money and he's headed towards Dell and they meet at a park.
You know, Dell, the other day, you said, "Where's my $5 million?" And Bruce and the Hanson kid took 8. You were right. I was fishing.
Now we're back at the office building that Marty and Bruce had been touring earlier. And now it's filled with FBI agents and they're removing bugs from the building. This is when we meet the fantastic Roy Petty. He's discussing something with another FBI agent and they're talking about how Bruce would have been an incredible witness to testify against the cartel. This is because the FBI believes that Bruce can be flipped really easily into becoming some sort of informant or witness against the Navarro cartel. And they think this of Bruce because he lives such a loud lifestyle based off the money that he's possibly been getting from the cartel. They've been after the Navarro cartel for a long time, so securing Bruce as a witness would have been a slam dunk, but now he's missing. So they're wondering what happened. So the last couple scenes are really important to hammer home a lot of the ideas throughout the entirety of the rest of the season. So while Wendy and Charlotte are packing up the car to leave, there's a slow zoom into the suitcases that contain the $8 million. So this detail is really subtle, but it's also very intentional. It's symbolic to the fact that right now the family doesn't know what they're packing up their life around. So they have all of their items, their possessions, and it's being packed around these suitcases of the $8 million. It also signifies that the money is now a family member. It moves with them, it takes up space, and it ultimately controls their lives now. In one of the very ending scenes, Marty pulls off the side of the road and he begins to break down and cry. This scene could be assigned to just a breakdown, but when we look at it deeper, it's one of the most character establishing scenes in the entire series. This is finally a release of a episode's worth of tension for Marty. So the entirety of the episode, Marty is very calm, he's calculated, he's even cold, but now the wood scene is the first time he actually feels something. He's carrying everything to betrayal, humiliation, and even the fear of death. This shows the break between what Marty presents himself to Dell and his family versus what he really is on the inside. And we all know he's probably losing his mind on the inside, but he needs to be this like strong front in order to be strong to Dell so he doesn't get taken advantage of or killed, and he needs to be strong for his family not to freak them out. But this scene finally makes you feel bad for Marty, and it is one of the last times we see Marty actually cry during a breakdown. There's other instances where he kind of loses it, but he never cries, he never sobs, he never says what he's been saying in this scene, which is like, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry." Now, the very final scene is the family looking over the lakes. There's something very subtle in this imagery, and it's that Wendy is very far apart from the rest of the family. So this signals that she's not fully with them, and she's just lost Gary, which was essentially her escape plan. So now her heart and her mind are somewhere else, and she's also stuck in the situation that she never signed up to be in. It also foreshadows her path to become a very power hungry person, and a lot of it doesn't involve the family. So it's hinting that she won't remain a passive housewife anymore. Okay, now I'd like to talk about the character dynamics within this episode. So, Marty is coined the rationalizer. On the surface level, he's a suburban dad and a financial advisor, but his true role in the series is obviously a cartel money launderer. So, Marty's dynamic with Bruce is it is implied that Marty does know something about this skimming scheme, and he does decide to just turn the other cheek and not get involved. But eventually, obviously, Marty is the scapegoat and he has everything resting on his shoulders, and now he's the primary launderer and he's in this incredibly messy situation, and that's through the fault of Bruce. He avoided this conflict until it was way too late, and this signals his cowardice by omission. Now, Marty's relationship dynamic with Wendy shows that he was very betrayed, but he wasn't as reactive. So his confrontation is not that explosive, and it shows that his pain is very compartmentalized rather than him truly feeling it. So Dell's influence on Marty's character development and his dynamic shows that Marty's survival skills are more based on persuasion than they are of like violence. And that creates the character that we know Marty to be. He's very persuasive, he can talk his way out of anything, and that's shown when we see the FBI and the bank, and also when he comes up with the Ozark scheme. Now, Wendy's character dynamic is the dissatisfied partner, and on the surface level, she's a political consultant turned housewife, but her true role is a very restless, unfulfilled woman who's seeking escape. So Wendy's dynamic with Gary is she was using him as an escape, but his death rips her away from that idea and throws her right back into Marty's orbit. And she obviously didn't choose this, and who knows if she was even thinking about leaving before this whole mess happened. But ultimately, she's now stuck. So on her end of the dynamic with Marty is their trust has been worn very thin and their relationship almost feels hollow. There's not much of a point to the marriage anymore. She just continually lies to him, and he literally hired a private investigator to see what she was up to, but they're bound by circumstance rather than by trust and love. The dynamic that she has with her family also really evolves by the end of the seasons because it's amplified by the fact that she's so power hungry. And obviously, she presents as this very caring woman. She cares about her kids, she cares about her husband. But deep down, surface level, we obviously know she was very willing to abandon her family emotionally and physically. So, Wendy's symbolic arc to the series is she's introduced as the betrayer, but the cartel kind of flips that back on her and throws it back in her face. And this is where her power hungry characteristics come to be seated because she feels really thrown off and she probably never wants to be humiliated like this again.